part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Producing While Asian. Today's episode is a conversation with Lora Nicolas Olaes. She is a actor and producer and event organizer, and she's currently the co-director of Young Global Filipinos for Leni Kiko. She is heavily involved in the political sphere, going back to the 2020 American presidential election as the co-director for Young Filipino Americans for Biden-Harris. And so currently we are in the middle of the Philippine election, which is who Leni and Kiko are, Leni Robredo, and she's running for president of the Philippines. So Lora is currently the co-director of a group of activists here in America helping to push for the vote in Manila. So this episode is airing on May 11th, so the election will have passed already, and so there will be a winner now that you're listening to this episode, but know that we're speaking in the context of leading up to the election in our episode today. So again, welcome back to Producing While Asian and our conversation with Lora Nicolas Olaes. Hey Lora, how are you? Thanks so much for being here.
Hi Don Mike, I miss you. So good to see you.
It's good to finally connect after so long. And so welcome to Producing While Asian. I'm so excited to talk to you and interview you about all your experiences in the last couple of years, because there's a lot to talk about.
There is a lot to talk about. So much has happened in just the last 2 years. So yes, I'm so glad this is happening to kind of like have a retrospective on everything.
Yeah, and you've accomplished a lot, so there's a lot to be proud of. So start with telling our audience a little bit about yourself. So not really about producing specifically, but kind of how did you get here on your journey? Where did you start, and what did you kind of go through in your career to now finally land where you're at in this moment?
Great. Hi, I'm Lora. I'm an actor, performer, I guess / producer now also. Yeah, I know. I'm everything. I started out performing at a very young age, the age of like 3 years old. My brother and I already decided that our big bay windows was going to be our stage. And we did these like kind of commercials or like singing, and we used the curtains for like actual like theatrical shows. So that would be my first start producing. Just kidding. I've always been involved in the arts, like singer, dancer, like actor in school and in church. Like it's like something that I knew I loved doing for a long time, but I never really considered it so much as a like career, at least at that time, because like I grew up in the Philippines, and not that people are discouraged to go into the arts, but although I was very encouraged to just pursuing what I was into, I was like trying to find other ways to possibly be my career. So I went into communication arts for college because it had a little bit of everything that I wanted to learn. How did I ended up being in the arts eventually, like actually pursuing it full time? It was a fateful summer trip to New York. And in that time, I met my boyfriend / future husband. I stayed for 6 months. And in those 6 months, I met so many Filipino American artists that inspired me to just audition, see what happens. And I did audition for a school. A common friend of ours, Liz Casasola, wrote my recommendation letter. And I got into the American Musical and Dramatic Academy because I realized at the time, you have your whole life ahead of you. Why not do something, like explore a part of you that you always knew while you're young, and not let's say I ended up in a different field. I will always look back when I'm a little older, like what would have happened if I actually took my chances in New York City. And I'm happy to say it's been a pretty wild ride, but there are some really good core memories in the performing world. I eventually got to play my dream role, Kim in Miss Saigon, 2 times, and lots of other roles. And it's been great. So I mean, so far so good. I don't know
you
what
are.
else to say.
Yeah,
I get
and
super
then,
self-conscious when I talk about like, so this is what I did. But yeah.
I mean, that's what happened. That's the story. And then, then further down the road, you ended up becoming, you were asked to start doing events, right? So that started with how,
Yes.
we met in a movie. So I know a lot of our audience who's been with us for Producing While Asian knows a couple of our fellow cast members for The Girl Who Left Home, but you and I met on the cast list of The Girl Who Left Home,
Yes.
and you played
I
Megan.
know. And that's like, I feel like kismet because we ended up being so involved together in so many different things.
So many
Like I
ways.
feel like you're like my brother from a different mother. Like yeah, we're so alike in so many ways, but you're a lot more on like organized than I am. But but I think we complement each other well, like, like creativity and all that. And well,
Yeah.
I'm saying it's been fun. It's a fun ride.
Was
Like
it was
doing
meant
stuff.
to be. And then you and I came back together after the movie, and you were asked to start planning events and rallying people for Filipino Americans for Biden Harris, and
Yeah.
talk about how you got involved there.
So this was 2020, and I think what really kind of like got me started like producing events online is because of the pandemic.
And
Like
you
all of a
also
sudden,
did you also worked in events too, right? Like you were part of
yes, I did. I have a background in events. That was actually, I told you I went to school for communication arts at the University of Santo Tomas. And that was my on-the-job training doing events. It's funny because like sometimes they just pull one of the interns, me, like, okay, you're now hosting the small show. And I'm like, what? They literally handed me my cue cards 10 minutes before I had to go up on stage.
Wow.
And you just have to like keep that energy up and like fake it till you make it, like I remember I was like 20 years old and like they literally just handed me the cue cards and I'm just like, all right, we're in performer mode. Yeah, they did that several times for like insanely cheap for them actually.
Right.
I was like one of the interns anyway, like I would do it. I'd have to do it for free. Thank God they paid me. But yeah, like I have a, what do you call it, like a natural passion or for events, for like putting together events and like putting together a program. Like I said in the very beginning, like even at at a young age, I was so involved in church and I was so involved in school. Like they would just, oh, Lora will write something, and then I would like write it. I write the script, act on it, produce it, and also the host is like, here's myself really to be like doing this play that I just wrote. You just like, you have all these other hats. Like I already had kind of the training for it. So like producing events in real life is like, you kind of have to have all these hats. So it felt like very natural for me. I also did some wedding events. I worked for Casal NY, weddings and photography. They stopped doing events right before the pandemic. My boss / one of my closest friends decided to move on and onto other things. Up until she closed up shop, I was like doing, weddings and events of Casal NY pretty regularly. Yeah. And I was her all around person. Like she could trust me with an event, like
For sure.
sometimes if she can't be there, she knows Lora could be her like second, what do you call it? Right hand man, or like the person who's standing as her, like the lineup for the day. So yeah.
And I'm sure that prepared you really well for when it came time that you were asked to lead young.
Oh, sorry, I totally digressed.
No, it's fine.
So I got first involved with Young Philams for Biden because my aunt was the national leader for Philams for Biden. So she was like, we need, kind of like someone to talk to the younger generation. So I'm a millennial and I was like, all right, like, well, we got to start like kind of like a young Philams version of what my aunt is already doing. And, like if not me, who? Like who will do it? Like who will have the time? And luckily also we had time. It's like one of the silver linings of I mean, I wouldn't say it's a silver lining of the pandemic because there
Oh,
are a lot of people who really had a hard time. So I don't mean to be like tone deaf or insensitive, but like I'm just saying producing online events came at the time that was very convenient for me because I was home a lot at the time, and it was a way to connect to people through the internet and just like proceed as though we are seeing each other in person, and like put up together these events that people could come together. And like our objectives was like to give our audience the language to kind of help them convince their own spheres of influence. And the goal was for every person to reach out to 20 people that they know, and hopefully those 20 people will also do the same thing until we win the 2020 election, which was very stressful.
so stressful. That was like probably the most stressful week of my life. Like
I
waiting
know.
for
Oh my gosh.
to come out.
It's just like I kept checking on my phone every few minutes.
Yeah, I feel like that I stayed up till like 3 o'clock in the morning every night just watching MSNBC, just like waiting for things to come through, and it was just such a mess. But no, yeah, it worked out well. And sorry to any listeners who may be on the other side of the aisle, but it's our turn. We have our awesome vice president who is half Asian, so it's always
yes.
Good. So yeah, and then of course you and I reunited doing that and bringing those.
Yeah, you actually reached out to me.
So yeah,
you're the one who reached out to me. I was like, oh, I see that you're. I don't even know what that first email was like. But like I see that you're very involved or something.
Yeah, I think I saw your aunt's posts somewhere. I saw her on TV on like ABS-CBN talking about like Philams for Biden, and then I was like, oh my gosh, that's Lora's aunt. So I reached out to you and I said, hey, how can I get involved with that? And then in the same moment, that was right around the time that she asked you to do the millennial young people's version.
And I was like, you'd be perfect for it because you're young, you're a film, you care about the same issues that I do. Oh my God, let's be core members. Like,
yeah. So and it was awesome. It was stressful at the same time, but in the best way. And I think you keep saying that you don't think you're a producer, but you definitely like flex your skills there. And based on your story, it started early. Like, I mean, I feel like producing is just organizing. Like being a producer is being
in a lot of ways. Yes, it is
knowing people and knowing who to call. And if you don't know who to call, knowing how to ask. That's kind of what I see being a producer, and that's everything that you're doing. So you're definitely a producer. And then we circle to our show together called Kabaya in New York, and we have for our listeners, that is a online talk show on the Global Filipino Network, or GFN channel, and Lora and I are the co-hosts for that show. To see how it all kind of weaves together, we just kind of ask each other to do projects.
I know.
And keep moving forward, and so we both produce that show. So that leads me to the next question, which is on a scale of 1 to producer, so like 1 to 10. 1 is not at all, 10 is, or producer is producer. Where on that scale do you sit? And the answer is always interesting because it depends on how you feel and what your experience is. And we ask that question because there's no definition of what a producer is.
What a producer is.
And then
that's true.
Right. Then you go into the different industries, and the different producers do different things. So for you personally, where do you feel you fall and why?
I would say about maybe halfway through, like 50%.
Like a 5.
Because I feel like I still have so much to learn. Like it's like every event is like, I'm definitely getting the hang of it. But every event is also like a new learning curve. Like, so I would say halfway through, because like I still have not been in a position where I am the producer of an event that's like live, where there's a live audience. So I feel like once sorry for the word, pop that cherry, that producing cherry. Sorry for the phrase.
That's fine.
Then maybe I could like rate myself a little higher. So as of right now, I would say I'm halfway there. Yeah. Because I'm also like a lot of the time putting on the hosting hat, like like that takes up a lot of time. And then also like sometimes you're tossed into editing or like sound mixing, like all these like other skills, and then writing. So like the actual producing part, it's like so many aspects to it that I don't think I've mastered everything yet. But it's getting there.
And you are. It's, and I'm lucky enough to be on this journey with you and seeing what you're learning and how you're changing and kind of how you react whenever we have like a fire we need to put out.
Yes.
And just the lead that you take when it comes to like booking guests for the talk show. Hopefully soon we'll be back on the air in 2020.
I know. Well, we did say fall because we started last year around the fall. So I think season 2 is going to be in the fall, and we have enough time to think about all the exciting guests that we're going to have.
So talk to me about representation, because that's essentially what this podcast is about. It's about pulling forward AA and HPI people and showcasing them to the community, not, our industry and beyond, because, with another guest, I said, my goal is to eliminate the phrase, we couldn't find them, quote unquote. Like we couldn't find them. Like that's part of why this exists. So talk about representation and your work as a performer, as an event organizer, as a producer. How do you weave that into what you do and why?
So as far as the industry is going, I think it's going on the right trajectory. We're finally seeing more representation, especially for Asians. Like 10 years ago, it would have been close to impossible to be able to play Filipino. But now there's so many projects out there that really highlights POC and the specific kind of POC you have to be. So there's definitely more opportunities there than there was when we started out in the industry. And like we're taking notice. A lot of other companies need to push the envelope a little further. But every time I see someone cast like non-traditionally, like it makes me feel happy that that's where, like, for example, musical theater is headed or the film industry is headed. Like all these comic book characters that are traditionally, white, like we're finally seeing more people of color out there. And that's great and all, but I feel like it's moving a little slow. There are times that for every 2 steps that we go forward, there's like, you'll hear another casting announcement that's just like, why did they give that role back to a white person that was already like, like even the content itself that they're trying to cast is traditionally POC. Like, like for every 2 steps forward, there's like a few of these productions that could really do better. Mm-hmm. And I feel like at this day and age, they shouldn't wait to be called out to do something about it. Oh, yeah. So I guess like in a way, that's also what like brought me to like in the producing world, because sometimes you kind of just have to put out the work, like the work that you want to see, the kind of work you want to be in. You just like, you make opportunities for yourself. And whenever, one of us succeeds, that's a good thing for everyone. Like we lift each other up. Yeah. And because there's going to be even more opportunities for people like us. I'm pretty happy at the direction it's going. I think it could be a little faster. But in the meantime, we're going to keep producing and going to put POC stories out there and amplify the messages that people are, trying to write, trying to put out there.
Mm-hmm. And we are smashing the gatekeeper myth by getting involved in that sense of our industry, of becoming producers, of telling the stories of our people, and kind of getting it out in the media, because there's a lot of things, and I have this way of thinking too, where it's like, oh, you see like a period piece, And, you see now there's period pieces coming up that have all different people of all different backgrounds and ethnicities. And it feels weird at first because you're like, well, no, at that time it was only white people. But then you think about it and you're like, no, I'm pretty sure there were, people of color in that world. They were around. It's just that media has made us think that it was not
invisible.
True. Yeah. They're invisible, or they only existed somewhere else. And, I think there's also a debate about what quote unquote non-traditional casting is, when it really just means we're filling in the blanks. That there were African American, or not even African American, but like Black people in certain places. There were Asian people in certain places. There were Latinx people. There were LGBTQ plus people in these environments and these times. It's just that Hollywood, when it was created, was only white people. So they created only white worlds. And so I think we're finally,
and it led people to believe that we're not out there, but even if we were, so
we're in a place where we can finally kind of push back against that, and that's where we come in.
Yeah, and especially I feel like stories that have nothing to do with race. Right. Like if you're just telling a story, there really is no reason why you can't be in a show. I just recently saw a culturally diverse Sound of Music with Diane Phelan and Ate Joanne Javien, and the kids, even the kids, there were Asian kids in there. It made me so happy to see that, because I mean, yes, I guess it takes place in a time, but there's really
there were people of color in Austria at that time.
That's true.
We just didn't see them, but they were there. I'm sure if we looked hard enough in the history books or asked people the family histories, there were people of color. It wasn't just people that looked like Julie Andrews.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So yeah.
But the fact that they're even looking this way, that they're looking now. There's no excuse. They're gonna see all the talent pool and not just be like, oh, this is not the right kind of ethnicity. The fact that people are pushing the envelope further in casting is a really good trajectory that we're going. As far as pushing the envelope when it comes to casting.
What's good, everybody? My name is Taylor Vanderbilt, and I'm the host of the 440 College Basketball Podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network. On the 440, we talk about literally everything college basketball related. It could be women's, it could be men's, it could be recruiting, it could be the tournament. It does not matter. We cover it all. So check it out. Again, it's the 440 College Basketball Podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Lora Nicolas Olaes, and this is Producing While Asian.
I'll ask this question because it's interesting you bring that production up, because my other guest this month, Alex Manalo in Pittsburgh, she brought that production up too. And she told a story. I won't tell the whole story so people listen to the episode, but she told a story about how when she was a kid, she tried out for the Sound of Music here in Pittsburgh with, I believe it was, actually, I'm not going to say the company because I don't want to shame them because they're pretty big here. But she got in, she got called back a couple of times for the kid roles, and she was 13, I believe. And then she didn't get cast. And it was the first time in her life that her mom had to tell her, and she's Filipino American, tell her that, look at the kids on stage. That's why you weren't cast in that role. Oh. And it, for her, she went through a whole self crisis at 13 of disliking herself because of our industry being so rough on the way you look, the way you sound, all that stuff, your ethnicity. And so talk to us a little bit about, and so it's great to hear you say the same thing, to see a diverse cast of children, a Filipino American Maria. And so in your career, have you run into moments like that where you felt, oh wow, I really wanted this, but I can see that me and the way I look was a roadblock to that? Or any other situation where your identity has come into play when it comes to an opportunity, and then connect that to your work and how you're beyond self producing things. How are you carrying that moment through to make sure that you either make sure it doesn't happen to someone else, or that you can teach other people, in terms of that moment for you?
Yes. Ooh, wow. That's a lot. like, okay, so the
I
first
also
question.
realize that a lot of this is like trauma bonding. Like there's a lot of trauma bonding in this show. Like we also hear
That's true.
our
I
moments.
totally, let me think. Oh my gosh, having two children makes you like forget a lot of things. I was like, oh, that feels now like forever ago. I kind of like essentially stopped auditioning since 2018 when I got, no, sorry, 2019 when I got pregnant with Leia. It's just a little too challenging to have also two kids on top of, you know, everything else and being performer and doing my part-time job. It's a lot. So I had something's got to give. So until like both my kids are in school, I mean, that's when I could see myself coming back to it. So that's why I'm little like trying to like remember, like, has there ever been kind of where I found out that me not being the right like ethnicity, really,
right,
ethnicity, because what is the right type? Like,
right, it's so broad.
Yeah, being not the right kind of ethnicity kind of made me lose a job or not be as seriously considered.
You were ever in a moment where you felt that, where you like it didn't even have to happen, but you felt that you were being considered differently based on who you are?
Oh yeah, I definitely remember like instances where like I would be getting far into like the casting and then didn't get the part, and you like kind of stalk on who gets it, and it's like, well, of course.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I remembered got called back for Juliet for like a Romeo and Juliet production somewhere. They got called back for it, and I thought I did well. But in the end, they just went with someone that's kind of traditionally whatever that means, but like, you know, like someone white, not like a white, you know, and sometimes like you kind of just have to let it go, you know, and like just keep putting yourself out there.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes even just like putting up a cover of a song is like your way of like, I could play this role, you know, like, look, like I'm just like, I don't have to wait for you to give your permission for me to sing this song. Like, you know, like I am just going to sing it, see what happens. You know, like sometimes you just have to create those opportunities for yourself, even if just for yourself. And if anyone happens to like it, that's like second. But as a performer, you kind of have to like just find ways to keep going and putting yourself out there and like do what makes you happy without like having to wait for people to give you permission to do that, you know, because they're like the producers. I don't know if that answered your question. Sorry.
It sure did. Yeah, you know, it's something that you've experienced, and you know, I'm sure everybody or most people that listen to our chat today can relate to that kind of experience. And so my hope is that
just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Like my hope is that, you know, people hear these stories enough that it starts to create change within our industry. Like change is happening, but like you said, I agree with you. It's moving very slowly. And it's like like you said, for every 2 steps forward, Scarlett Johansson gets cast as an Asian person.
I know.
So
like,
what?
Oh my God.
All that.
I'm like, well, if there's like a good example, I just thought of Aquafina. She just like, the funny thing is her father was someone that we were in the Dragon Boat team with. And I remember Wally is his name. I'm just like saying, oh yeah, like my daughter, like, I don't know, like she raps and she's like, kind of, you know, she has like funny YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And then like, just like she created that path for herself. And it's amazing. Like, I just realized like, wait, is this Wally's daughter? Like when she was starting to make a name for herself.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's possible. Now that's possible, you know, just like kind of like just keep putting out content, keep putting out like things that make you happy. And, you know, the hope is it gets picked up. But like sometimes it's also just something that you have to do for yourself. And say, like, I had an idea. I don't want to be pregnant with this idea for too long because I don't want to not have the drive to do it. And I'm just going to do it. Like I had this idea for content for Young Global Filipinos for Leni. And also, really, for me, it's a song from the musical Here Lies Love, which is about the rise and fall of Imelda Marcos. And what really inspired me doing it was because on one of our discussions with the team, I'm currently co-directing Young Global Filipinos for Leni. And while we were discussing, one of us said, oh, maybe we should leave out the extrajudicial killings that are happening in the Philippines because we should just focus on social media, disinformation, and the suppression of the press. And I was like, why? I mean, the whole reason why they're being suppressed and, threatened is because they're covering the truth, which is these extrajudicial killings. And they were like, oh, because it's really not that topical. People don't care about it. So I was just like so dumbfounded, and I was so heartbroken that a lot of people don't care about these crimes against humanity, just like these extrajudicial killings, this drug war and things like that. So I was like, I wanted to do this video because I wanted to show the parallelism between 1986, like the EDSA revolution, and the movement that we're seeing now that's resisting the current government. And I was asked to sing this for a concert in Canada where everyone was singing like Somewhere Over the Rainbow or like Impossible Dream. And here's Lora with like, Ninoy Aquino got assassinated, and this is the song that Aurora Aquino, like Ninoy's mother, sang. I mean, in this musical Here Lies Love. And so I combined two things that I'm, passionate about, like singing and like, the social activism, that it's not okay that people are getting killed left and right. Like I wanted to kind of bring that to people's attention. Now, why is this not topical? Why do you not care that ever since Duterte was in power, 34,000 plus people got killed already because of this drug war? So I just put it out there. I sang all 5 parts. I edited it, sound mixed it, gathered the pictures, got someone to play the instrumental. And I feel like that in itself was like, I was the producer and I was everything. I was the talent. I was the copywriter. I wrote this really long explanation on why I did this video. And I found another talent because there's no like instrumental track anywhere for this. And you're like everything. And it took so many hours to put it together. But sometimes when you're just pregnant with an idea, just follow through. You gotta put it out there. And happy to say it has like 100 something shares and like, like a lot of views. And I don't care like what, about the glory of like, oh, wow, she did that all by herself, like, 5 voices and whatever. I care about how people will take it. And I'm just hoping that it'll change someone's mind and realize that these are people getting killed. So,
I mean, look, you're your own Lin-Manuel. You did all of the things and put
Pretty
yourself
much.
in it. And now, it's getting some attention, which is really great. And, I think there's a lot to be said about how the arts can change people's opinions and how the arts.
Definitely. That's what I feel like.
And
especially
so,
artists
Mhm.
have such an important role to play because artists always reflect the truth. Like, is it any wonder why they were having such a hard time getting people at like Trump's inauguration, like getting people to perform, or like, and in the same way, like Bongbong's campaign, they're having a hard time just like getting just the most talented or like prettiest, most popular artists there are, because like artists know what's up. Like, they become artists because they have something to say. They're not like artists would not support someone who's like pushing for fascism, Well, I guess a majority of artists at least, but yeah. So we all have a role to play. If you have something to like put to the table to like get your message out, and if there's like an effective, like if arts is an effective way to get that message out, like that's what we're here for. Like go for it.
Totally. Yeah. And, I feel like the super artist is the artist that can perform and can organize. at the same time, so you're not dependent upon either side coming through for you, right? You can do both. And so it's really inspiring to see that, in your journey, and to where you are doing that, for the young Filipinos for Leni. And so for anybody listening, for those that are kind of wondering, like, what are they talking about, who may not be Filipino, Leni Robredo is the current candidate for president of the Philippines. She's running for president. And so
she's the current VP and the only position, on the highest like kind of level of government, but she's in the opposition side. So when Duterte won, she's actually for the other party, and she's the more progressive candidate and really did a lot of work in alleviating people in the Philippines who are like really, really on the kind of just like stuck in poverty. She, like, with the small budget that she has the smallest budget in all of the bureaucracy, but she somehow was able to help about 600,000 families with the little budget that's given to her. And she has so many programs. And she has no record of corruption whatsoever. But unfortunately, because of this information proliferated in media that largely remained unchecked from 2010 to 2016, there have been like black propaganda against her by what we all know is coming from the other camp. She is up against Bongbong Marcos, who is the son of a former dictator who we defeated at a bloodless revolution. Wow, now I'm giving you all like a Philippine
history lesson. Right, it's good though.
Yeah, and his running mate is the daughter of the current wannabe dictator, Sara Duterte. So,
it's a tense time. I feel like you're transported back to November 2020.
Oh my God.
In there again.
I talk about this all the time, Dominic, that our election here in America is more important for the world because America is a world leader. So we needed to give, like, even though like it's really hard to kind of like launch this campaign amongst your, like our Filipino American community and like kind of do it all volunteer, even though that's hard. You have to think about like, what does it mean for the world if another 4 years under Trump happens, like what does it mean for the environment? So, but now, like, come to think of it, because in the Philippines, it really is like life and death for a lot of people. Journalists will be in danger, like activists, a lot of other innocent people who are just like killed for no reason other than they were in the way of the person that they were trying to gun down. It's not right, and we have to resist. So.
Exactly, and you're doing it through the arts, and you're doing it as a producer.
I'm doing it as a producer, and
awesome.
Doing all the things, and just hope for the best. Pray.
What's really awesome is you've kind of answered a question that we ask everybody on the show as well, which is kind of, what would you tell somebody who wants to kind of follow your path and do something similar to what you're doing? You've talked about it. It's, create your own opportunities, and if you have something to say it. And if it's in the arts, which is why we're here, you can. And, I think it's awesome that there's so many platforms that are free that people can take advantage of to do this. Because, the ultimate gatekeeper, even like 30 years ago, was the fact that you couldn't put your own stuff out there without somebody else having to say it's okay.
Yes.
So, the fact that you can just do it, I think is really kind of contributing to what we're seeing in regards to the change that we like seeing in our industry. Because we can't have people like, is it Ruby Ibarra, like come up and just like put herself out there.
Love her stuff.
And see people like J.R. de Guzman, who's like a really young comedian who's posting his own stuff on Instagram, and he's hilarious.
I know, I always run into his stuff. I was like, oh yay, and he's super funny. Good for him.
He's somebody that we're trying to get on this show, and he's like, he's
where's he based?
He's in Los Angeles.
Oh man, I was hoping you'd say New York, because you could invite him for Kabayan.
Right? We could. He's so busy, but he's actually very responsive on Instagram. We pulled him in for this event last year in Las Vegas called Marahuyo that was executive produced by myself and a friend, Cheryl Darrow, who will be on the show as well. And we pulled him in to do a set. And I only kind of knew about him back then, and that was only a year ago. And now he's like becoming who he is. He's like it's like you started with Rex Navarrete and then you got Joe Coy, and now the next step I can see is this kid.
No, he's so naturally funny. Like I feel like I can do what he does, just like, kind of like see someone and make something up for that. Yeah, that's such like good improv skills. Oh man, and considering like he moved here when he was a little, like he didn't grow up. Wait, he grew up here, but he was born and raised for some time in the Philippines. Am I right?
I'm not gonna say anything that might be wrong, but perhaps
I feel like that's a skill. Like for me, especially with English not being the first language, just like it always gets me a little kind of nervous. Just like, like kind of improving. Oh my gosh. But
yeah,
until you make it.
Yeah, I would be nervous doing it myself too. But you know what? JR can come on the show and tell us all about his story and we will know. So I'm just going to add pressure in every episode to be like, hey, JR, like come to Producing While Asian.
Want to hear more about your favorite TV shows and movies that are on countless streaming services?
Then listen to Up Next with your new favorite hosts, me, Kristen Aviles,
and me, Christina Walter.
Every other week, we'll highlight one genre, but 2 movies or TV shows, one old and one new.
We'll let you know what's hot and what's not from your favorite
or least favorite
streaming services.
And be sure to stay tuned to the end of each episode where we shout out an artist whose name you should know for their talent in the industry.
So follow us to stay up to date with your favorite hosts from Up Next,
a part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary. And if you've ever wondered where you can turn $50 into $5,000 legally outside of Las Vegas, then the sports card market, which is completely insane right now, might be for you.
Join us for the Ball Card Show, the sports podcast for the sports collector.
Hi, I'm Lora Nicolas Olaes, and this is Producing While Asian.
So we've been talking a lot about things that like move us, but in the sense of like we need to change the world because of a negative thing. Talk to us about some joys that you've run into, like moments of happiness that you've run into in your journey. What have you been involved with as, whether lead producer or just somebody who's been on the team to create something? Tell us about a moment or moments that have made you excited or proud, or a moment where you ended up working with someone you never thought you'd work with because of what you've put into the project, stuff like that.
Maybe I won't go into that, but
yeah,
let's go with joys.
Joys.
Joys like that in my journey as an actor. I've been able to play a lot of my dream roles, or like shows that I wanted to be involved in, and I'm happy to have been able to be part of like new up and coming work. I remember like in 2021, last year, I was invited to sing backup for like a new concept album. It's called Goodbye New York. Ariel Jacobs was gonna be the lead to it. And it's just like, especially after a long time of like, kind of being in hiatus, it's like having an opportunity like that, just like to be able to sing. It's really like kind of like, oh, I'm so glad I scratched that itch, to perform. I'm like happy to say I've been like, whenever I do like try out for stuff, I always get something, sometimes being non-traditionally cast. That's like a kind of like an awesome feeling to get that you weren't just looked at for your race.
Right.
I think that's something to be, kind of to be proud of. Like I got to play roles like Joanne in Rent or Janet Van de Graaff in like Drowsy Chaperone. Just, I feel very lucky that I get to have experiences like that, and that also we're now like ushering into day and age where you could actually play Filipino.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because roles are now written for Filipinos. So the girl who left home was a big career high, like does those 17 days of magic in
I can't believe it was only
Baltimore.
17 days.
Yes, I know. It was 17 days. I drove on film. That's something to be proud of. I essentially learned how to drive in Manila for 1 month and then moved to New York. So never got to use this skill. So that was like a new muscle to kind of get used to, kind of like you're acting, like you've been driving for years and doing a scene and like actually do the thing. Oh my God, I was so proud of that scene. I know it's it's nothing to most people, but like, look at me. I'm driving. And the other part is like, I'm glad that I'm involved with a lot of kind of these extracurricular things that like amplify Filipino voices. You know, we are both board members of the Filipino American Symphony Orchestra. Like last year, we've collaborated with their, like both as a producer, as a host, and also as like kind of like I like flexed all my kind of producing muscles trying to put out these 2 online events that you and I have been part of. Wait, are you part of the first, just the December concert we did together? Yes, right. Mm-hmm. And then the summer concert we were both in the team.
Yeah, we were on the team, but they asked us to lead produce, but we like didn't know what that meant. So we were like, oh, we'll step back. Okay. So
yeah, I think it went really well, and like we got like almost 10,000 views. You know, like, to me, it's always like a source of pride to be able to be part of something like that, where we put forth our culture and our Filipino-ness, you know.
I'm noticing more and more there are characters and shows that feature Filipino people like upfront, like full face value Filipino. There's some show on, I can't remember, but it's a network that used to be Fox Family, I think, and now it's something else. But there's some show about 2 girls, and the one girl, like, I didn't even hear her voice or her name yet in the preview, but I saw her in like a butterfly sleeve kind of dress.
Oh, yay.
Like, wait, was she Filipino? And like, of course, it turns out her name is Mariana. And I was like, okay, there you go. And she
what's the last name?
Right. And she looks Filipino American. And sure enough, it's a character, not just a mention, but a character that is Filipino. And, you see Vincent Rodriguez, right? Is that his last name?
Yes.
Crazy ex-girlfriend, and then just on and on. There's so many, and it's just has to do with so many people who are putting in the effort to just put us out there. Like, we're here, we're part of this community, we're part of this country, we exist. Eat our egg rolls, so why can't we be on your TV show? So it's like all these things, and it takes folks like you and me that go out there and do things like Kabay in New York and produce concerts with the Filipino American Symphony Orchestra and be in projects like The Girl Who Left Home, that's an all Filipino cast, to make that happen. And it's great.
And like even with The Girl Who Left Home, because you just mentioned, like it's done some pretty good mileage. Like, it went all over the country. We got that kind of immortalized forever, that moment in time. And that's also one of my dreams, to be like being able to see myself in the big screen for the first time. I did a short where I was able to see myself in the big screen. It's the first feature length movie where it was like all Filipino. It was surreal. It was like kind of like a sense of pride that you didn't know you had, because like you didn't know it was possible. You know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh. Like, I am in a Filipino American produced film, and we're in the big screen. Like, this is possible if you just follow them,
And we have mainstream talent
mainstream talent. Like, we could do it,
We could do it. It's possible. And, I'm ready for my DVD copy, Mallory, whenever that happens. So.
Shout out to Valerie.
Valerie, our director and writer, like ready to have my own private copy of this movie.
She's another one who should be in your show. Was she already in your show?
Nope, not yet. And she's just been so
she's
crazy
also
busy.
wearing all those hats. Like she's a producer, writer, director.
Right. Her and Dylan, Ty, trying to get everybody in the door to talk about what they do. I already had Angelo on the show. He closed out last season, so he's already alluded to the rest of his executive team to be on this show. So we'll see. Hopefully in season 2 we can bring them in. But second to last question, I'm so glad that you're here as part of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Talk to us about what you'd like to see in the future in terms of our community and what's been going on in the world in regards to AA and HPI people in America. Now that we do see things that are slowly changing and all that, what would you love to see more of, whether it be in our industry or just in the world in general, for our community in celebration of what this month is?
Well, I would like to see more of what a lot of like POC Filipino producers are already doing, but on a kind of a national stage. It's not just the people in those communities knowing about it. Like it's no longer like what I really love to see in the future, where it's I say this all the time, but like in Star Trek age, like people don't Star Trek age. I'm sorry, I'm a huge nerd, but like when you live in a society where like you're with aliens and you're like with all sorts of people, and it's no longer like, oh wow, you're like, like, oh wow, like your captain is like an alien. You know what I mean? Like I want that kind of utopia. That's what I really want to see. That when it comes to like producing content, that nothing is like would shock you anymore because it's already the norm.
Yeah.
That like I really want just like more of us out there, that it's not just like for every 5 white people in the show, there's like one POC. Right. Like I want it to get to a point where people are just used to it. No one's like, there are no angry fanboys being like, well, why did they choose a woman, or why did they choose a minority? Like that, it's just like, get used to it. We're here to stay.
This is.
Like that's the future I want to go into. It's funny because my mind immediately like just Star Trek age. I want us to be like utopia, like just every kind of person there is that exists can be the main character.
Absolutely. And you see it happening, everywhere. And I think we live in that time now where we're working towards that. Because one tiny example is like when I would go down the jetway to get on the airplane, and like for Delta specifically, they have ads in the jetway. And now you're starting to see like, you've always seen like interracial couples, but now you're seeing 2 men, 2 women, like older men, like, true inclusion and diversity. You see people that are disabled, handicapped in these ads, and people with developmental challenges.
Yes, definitely.
Those people in ads. So I think we're getting there. Star Trek age is coming. We're
Star Trek age.
It's coming.
Yeah. And until that time comes, you just have to keep pushing the envelope,
right?
Because or like kind of call them out and you feel like they're like, sometimes they kind of go in a way where they would like borderline patronize, and that's also not like the right point,
right?
Yeah, when it's performative, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm still grateful that they finally like could see aside from what's already in front of them, like that there are other types, there are other different kinds of people. I'm glad that that's happening, but again, we could always push it further.
For sure. So on that note, before we wrap up, where can the audience find you? Like people that want to connect with you, they want to work with you or collaborate or hire you for whichever skill you mentioned today, where can they find you? Tell us the best way to get in contact with you.
Well, I have Instagram. It's Miss Lora, MISS, Lora, LORA, Nicolas, because I'm Lora, Nicolas Olaes. So I just put my last name together. So that's LORANICOLAES. And I'm also on Facebook. You can look me up, Laura Nicolas Olaes. I have a website. It's www.loranicolas.com. And if you want to get involved with any of my political activism, you can just message me through Young Philams for Biden, or actually now Young Philams for Liberty and Justice.
Yeah, it was like Liberty and Justice, right? So,
but I think on Facebook, it's still Young Philams for Biden, or Young Global Filipinos for Leni Kiko. So that's what I'm currently busy with. I love a good collaboration. If you have any ideas, like how to help the campaign. Right now, the audience is ready for so much more content. Like I would see like someone just string together like these like videos full of people that were just willing to lend their talents, and it makes me like legit cry, because I'm like the spirit of volunteerism that like VP Leni inspires. Like if that trickles down to every Filipino, it's gonna be so awesome,
Just like here, just like the movement to change the governance in 2020. Yeah. It was just a movement of we've had enough.
Yeah.
And, I think I have a lot of admiration for Filipinos and their government our government, because it's just, we Americans were through it when we had like 4 years of stuff we didn't like. The Filipinos have to deal with 6 years of things they don't like. Even though a president cannot run again, it's still 6 years of time.
Still 6 years, yeah. And it's like a long time if it's bad governance.
Right.
So like staying silent only serves them. So we have to always speak out. Remember our motto in Young Philams for Biden: speak up, show up, step up.
Step up, right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you remember that, because I was like, I remember it.
What is it?
What is it?
Step up, show up. Yeah, because if it's not you, like, who will? And
exactly. You can't always depend on someone else to do it for you, which is why we do what we do. And so it was so good to have you, and so amazing to hear your story, and, best of luck with all of the efforts, and, fingers crossed on what will happen. You're welcome to come back anytime. I say this to all of our guests, and, take a look at who's been on the show. I'm always down for like collab conversations between different guests from different times about hot topics, and we'll go from there. And hot topics in like a legit way, not quite a Wendy Williams hot topics kind of way, but things that matter. And that's why we're here.
Things we're passionate about.
Thank you again for being here. So good to have you, and I will see you on the next episode that we have you on.
Thank you so much, Don Mike. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Producing While Asian podcast. Our theme song was created by Luckstock. We're produced by Press Play Podcasts, and the show is edited by Michael Santos Sandoval. If you have a moment, please leave a rating and a review, and send any ideas you have to producingwhileasian@gmail.com. To follow us, stay updated, or to read our blog, visit www.producingwhileasian.com.